Welcome to our second annual virtual career fair sponsored by the Dana Foundation Career Network in Neuroscience and Society. We're really excited that you're here live and in virtual person. For those who are watching the recording, we're excited that you're here as well. I am Francis Shen. I have the pleasure of directing the Career Network. We're going to say some thank yous, and then we're going to get right into this great night. And I'll introduce our panelists in just a moment. So first of all, I want to say thank you to the Dana Foundation. The Dana Foundation makes all of this possible. We're going to hear from the president of the Dana Foundation, Dr. Montoyo, in just a moment. But thanks to Dr. Ramos, Dr. McEntee, Ishan Dasgupta, all of our friends at the foundation for making this possible. Thank you as well to the Career Network RA team, especially the people you see on your screen and some of the people you're going to meet tonight and in the breakout rooms. Thanks to the entire lab that I run for making it possible. Thank you to all of our partners, and we'll put the website in the link neuroxcareers.org where you can learn more about all of our partners. A special thank you to one particular partner, Simply Neuroscience. And I'm going to invite the founder and CEO of Simply Neuroscience, Chinmay Balusu, to say a couple words.
Thanks, Dr. Shen. I'm really excited to see you all here tonight. Simply Neuroscience is super excited to be co-sponsoring the Career Fair last year and this year once again. We are a student-led community that focuses on early career neuroscience outreach and education. And I'll also be hosting a breakout room later tonight. So if you'd like to stop by and chat about some of these initiatives, perhaps how to pursue neuroscience opportunities early on, happy to chat.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to do one plug. There are lots of great events that you can get involved in. They're highlighted in our newsletter. One that we want to just mention is with colleagues from the International Neuroethics Society. Winston Chung and others are putting together a great program on clinician neuroethicists, career and funding roundtable. We'll put that link in the chat, so check that out. And for more events like that and all sorts of opportunities, go on over to the website, neuroxcareers.org. I won't go through it now, but you can do it tonight and beyond. All right, so drum roll. It is my great pleasure to introduce tonight's panel. What I'll do is introduce each panelist in a little more detail before they speak. We're going to hear tonight from Dr. Caroline Montoyo, Dr. Lynette Jones, Dr. Liz Toomarian, and Emma Bleakman. We're going to cover broadly neuroscience and society, neuroscience and public health, and we'll talk about public policy and educational neuroscience. There are so many great intersections. And then in the second hour, if you stick around, you can just talk more and in a really informal one-on-one setting with our great breakout room leaders, who I'll introduce just a little bit later. Again, thanks to the Dana Foundation. Let me stop sharing and let me introduce our first speaker. Dr. Caroline Montoyo is the president and CEO of the Dana Foundation, which is advancing neuroscience in society through initiatives like this one and many, many others. She serves on the advisory board of the Science Philanthropy Alliance and the NIH Brain Initiative Neuroethics Working Group. She has significantly advanced neuroscience through multiple roles, including those with the U.S. Brain Initiative, the International Brain Initiative, and a litany of major awards and speaking engagements. Trained neuroscientist, for those interested in the career path, and we'll learn a little bit more about that. Postdoctoral research at UCLA was on neurobiomarkers for psychiatric illness, and there she was award-winning for there as well, multiple awards. BA from University of California, Berkeley, shout out to California, and her MA and PhD from Johns Hopkins University. I just want to say a special thanks to Dr. Montoyo for believing in this vision. And we're really excited for you to kick off our virtual career fair tonight. Let me turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Francis, for that very generous introduction. I really appreciate it. I'm going to pull up some slides here. And while I do, I just want to say it's so wonderful to see everybody filling the Zoom room right now. It's so actively filling up at 291 already. As Francis said, I am Caroline Montoyo, President and CEO of the Dana Foundation, and we are absolutely delighted to be supporting the Career Network for Neuroscience and Society. I also want to say a huge thank you to the organizers of this virtual career fair, especially Francis Emily Rodriguez, Chinmay Balusu, McKenna Law, and all of the participants who make this event possible. And I want to especially thank all of you who showed up today from wherever you are dialing in from around the world. And I'm just really excited to be able to share insights and reflections coming from my own career, which, it doesn't feel too long ago that I was trying to make all of these different decisions in all of these sort of inflection points throughout my career. So really excited to share that. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slides. I think you all can see this, I hope.
Yeah, they look great.
Fantastic. Excellent. All right. So I think, as Francis asked us to share about our career paths and our sort of neuro X areas, I think the one biggest reflection I had was when I was going into college, I really thought that my career would look something more like this, that it might be a pretty linear path where one thing led to another in a clear step-by-step way. But as I started reflecting on this presentation, I thought, oh my goodness, actually, my career path turned out to be more like something like this. And in that sense, it had a lot of starts, a lot of stops and twists and turns where I was learning more about who I was and what my interests were and how I could encapsulate that and channel that into a career. And so when I was asked to even describe what my NeuroX field was, that was really hard because I think it ended up being neuroscience and many areas like mental health, then philanthropy, science diplomacy, ethics, and to some extent public engagement. So I'll go into that a little bit today. Hopefully that'll be an illustration of all these twists and turns and some of the things I learned along the way. So when I went into college at UC Berkeley, my first stop was thinking that I was going to go on to be a counseling psychologist. I was really interested in mental illness. I wanted to learn more about it, and I thought I would want to go into therapy. So I entered into an internship in bereavement counseling with Kaiser Permanente at the time. But I also realized that that one-on-one therapy setting was quite difficult for me in terms of buffering myself emotionally with patients. And so this was like the first twist, I think, in my expectations. I was still interested in psychology, and I discovered a field called cognitive neuroscience, which you sort of see in the corner there. And I thought this was a wonderful blend of both the mind and the brain. And I was lucky enough to get a research assistant position in the lab of Art Shimomura, who you see in this picture here. And he was a wonderful mentor to me, so much so that I ended up doing my senior thesis in his lab. You see a draft of that there. She pulled it up from the college days. And as I was tying up at UC Berkeley, I decided, oh, I think I want to keep on staying on this whole research track. Not sure yet where that'll take me, but just to give you an idea of how sort of, I was still thinking about a lot of different domains. I actually applied half to programs in counseling and clinical psychology, and then half in cognitive neuroscience. So I was already somewhat undecided early on. A lot of career interests. But then after that, so I went on to Johns Hopkins, where I focused on cognitive neuroscience, more of the fundamental or basic neuroscience areas. And as I was going through my career, I realized that I still wanted to be more closely connected to making an impact on society. And I wanted more collaboration with people coming from a lot of diverse backgrounds. And so herein was another twist in the career, which is I started exploring other interdisciplinary career paths while I was at Hopkins, thinking about even neuro law, other areas is quite broad. But ultimately, I decided that I wanted to channel my training back into mental health and decided to do a postdoc at UCLA in a psychiatric neuroscience lab, which you see here. I did this with Carrie Bearden. Here I am in the middle with a colleague of mine presenting our results at SFN. I think we thought we were part of the Price is Right, presenting a new car behind us, but this is actually just our research findings. And then here I am giving a talk for a neuroscience postdoc award that I got there. But still, I had that pull as I was finishing up my postdoctoral career there. I wanted to merge my background in a way that connected more closely to societal impact, but I didn't know what that would be. So I just jumped into informational interviews in everything from human factors research to science writing. And it also happened, I was in a business of science center at UCLA, and there was a private foundation. I knew nothing about private foundations, but they were presenting there. They're called the Kavli Foundation. And they were talking about how they did all this convening work for something that later became the US Brain Initiative. And so I thought, oh, so you could still have one foot in the science and you could have another foot in sort of convening and funding and policy work to help pair with that. So I felt immediately attracted to that. And fortunately, they said at the end of this presentation, hey, does anyone want to come to lunch with us to get to know more about this? And I said, take me with you. And so there I was. Fortunately, there was a position open at the time. It was an entry-level position. I was stuffing name tags for a very long time. I was just trying to do anything I could to be helpful. But that career path ended up leading to, what then became a career in science philanthropy. I got to get involved in the International Brain Initiative, facilitating and convening that, as well as work on the Brain Initiative Alliance. And so that took me down yet another path into science diplomacy. I started to get very interested in the ethical and societal implications of neuroscience. And so that ultimately led me to my work at the Dana Foundation. I know I went through that so quickly, trying to stay on time, but always happy to answer more questions. But at the Dana Foundation, I'm just so delighted because our focus over the past 3.5 years since I've come here and worked with wonderful team members like Kara Ramos, Ishan Dasgupta, Farron McEntee, is to advance neuroscience that benefits society and reflects the aspirations of all people. So here you see in this picture, I'm with my staff members here at the top right-hand corner, and then we're with several of our grantee groups also in these bottom corners. And it's just been such wonderful work, which I can share more about as we go on. But one of the things that I did want to reflect on before coming off is just some of the career reflections and advice that I could give as I think about those different stages and trying to maneuver those twists and turns and figuring out what do I do when I grow up. And so I think one of them is, I think the quote of luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. This is one quote that's often attributed to Roman philosopher Seneca. And I think about at each of those career stages, I kept my head down. I still wanted to do my best at what I was doing, even as I was thinking that there might be another path that I was feeling called to that would resonate even more closely with my interests and my values. And so, I think that mix of preparation, individual preparation and opportunity is really important. Some other career advice more specifically, I think one of them is I realize that people who have interdisciplinary interests, sometimes they call us boundary spanners. It tends to be the case that when you're at that application period, you apply for almost 2 sets of positions. And so every single time I made a next step, I was like applying for maybe this and that. And so that was just a really interesting experience to kind of have that resume or the CV prepped for these 2 different paths, maybe the more traditional one, plus one that's a little bit less defined. A second one I think is around informational interviews. And here I really felt I had to go out of my comfort zone. I wasn't used to talking to people coming from such different fields, but you just never know who you're going to meet and where that might lead you. And then I think the other reflection I have is the importance of sharing what you can uniquely bring and channeling your experience into what that potential employer may need. While I may not have been the perfect fit for all of the positions that I applied for, what I tried to do is say, well, there is this other thing, this other perspective that I bring that may be useful to you in the future. And so it's important to be able to reflect on those unique contributions and your unique perspective that you bring. And then the final thing I'm going to end on is the importance of mentors and supporters along the way. I wouldn't be where I am without so many people who have really helped to lift me up on all of those points where I might feel like I was lost, or that I didn't get to do what I thought I was going to do. It really needs an active support network in order to always lift you up. So that's all I have. But I just wanted to say thank you again for joining. Really looking forward to the discussion, and I'm so glad that you all could join tonight.
Thank you so much for those really wonderful words. We're going to go next to Dr. Lynette Jones. I'm going to remind everyone that the Q&A is open, so we'll have time at the end for questions and some great answers. So pop your questions in as they come up. for any of our speakers, and then we'll do it all at the end. What you just heard, from Dr. Montoya is, I think, something that all of our speakers tonight and throughout this week share, and that is a desire to be both rigorous in science, but also make a real difference in the lives of people. And certainly someone who does that is our next speaker. Dr. Lynette Jones is the Nancy S. and Michael B. McClellan Professor of Nursing in the Department of Health Behavior and Biological Sciences at the University of Michigan. She's a behavioral neuroscientist interested in eliminating the health disparities affecting African-American women with hypertension. She's done really neat research, so we'll put her link in the chat. You should check it out. Focused on uncovering the biological, psychological, social, and physical mechanisms of self-management interventions through neuroimaging methods such as fMRI, as well as examining health information behavior. I think, Dr. Jones, you must bleed maize and blue because you have a BSN, MS, and PhD from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, our friendly rivals to the north here in Minnesota. But thank you so much for being here. And I know there's a lot of interest from our students in neuroscience and public health. Thanks for sharing your expertise with us.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Give me 1 second to share. Okay. Does
We're
that look
seeing
okay?
your speaker view, like the
Oh,
slide.
okay. Let me, how's
There we
that?
go. Looks great. Thank you.
Okay. Excellent. All right. So thank you so much for the invitation to be here this evening. Super excited to talk about my work and how it might be of interest of you all. So first, I always start with this slide whenever I'm presenting, because I think it's really important for you to understand who is talking with you and how their experience shapes their worldview. And so I'm going to start by saying I'm a registered nurse. I started my career in the intensive care unit. And even though I've been asking the same research questions since I was an undergrad in a Europe research experience, when I worked as a registered nurse in the ICU, there were so many Black women that came in to get their blood pressure managed in the ER or in the ICU setting. And so sometimes when patients come in, they're called frequent flyers. And so I would continue to see these women. But what really bothered me is that sometimes, they would come in and say, I tried everything, it didn't necessarily work for me, or I couldn't keep up those changes. Or sometimes it would be even worse. They would come in and have a stroke or be diagnosed with end-stage renal disease. So as much as I loved working in the ICU, one of my mentors told me, you're going to get a PhD because you can help more people not at the bedside. So I finally understood what she meant, and I decided to go back to school. And so, as you heard, I do have my bachelor's, master's, and PhD all from the University of Michigan. I had never set foot in Cleveland before, but I went to interview at Case Western and learned more about opportunities to study brain behavior connections, which I'm going to talk more about today. And so this is my 7th year as faculty, and you already heard about my endowed professorship. But I really have always focused on how can I better help Black women to manage their blood pressure and prevent some of those negative outcomes that we talked about. And so I have 2 pillars that support my program of research. So one is health information behavior. And so I spend a lot of my time thinking about how women seek, share, and use information in order to make evidence-based decisions. So not just like, oh, I feel like this today, or oh, this might work better just because it's convenient, but really thinking about how am I going to manage my blood pressure on an everyday basis and what I'm doing in my everyday life. I also use fMRI as a tool to think about how brain activity predicts self-management behavior. And so there's some predictions that have been done about how likely people are to quit smoking or how likely they are to use sunscreen when they are in extended amount of exposure to the sun. And so I really thought, how can we take that and apply that to people in managing their blood pressure, especially because there's not a lot of symptoms of high blood pressure until it's almost too late. And so really, I talked a lot about evidence-based strategies, but I'm sure you're learning about that whether you're an undergraduate or in graduate school. What does the evidence say? And so not just things that we come up with, not what is one person's experience, but what does it say across the research? And so just briefly, when you talk about management of hypertension, these are the things that are important. So it's really, how do you eat? How often are you exercising? Are you saying no to things like salty treats or alcohol, or limiting those things? And really how you practice self-care in order to have habits that keep your blood pressure within a safe range. So that being said, I learned that women who share information are more likely to use information to make evidence-based decisions. And that was completely different than my hypothesis for my dissertation, which I was a little upset about at first, but it really launched my career path. And so I was presenting on sharing of health information at a conference, and I met Dr. Shirley Moore. Uh-oh. Okay, I hope that's a smiley face that we're drawing, that we're excited on the screen. But Dr. Shirley Moore was an expert in self-management science, and she had just got a really large grant in order to study brain behavior connections. And so in this, it's called P30 Center Grant. There were nurses, neuropsychologists, and psychologists, and we all got together and tried to learn how to speak the same language and really try to go from a clinical practice perspective of what nurses were doing to help manage chronic disease. There were 7 different chronic diseases that we were all studying. And then from a neuropsych perspective of what's happening in the brain and how does that lead to certain behaviors. So this is a busy slide, but I wanted to show you, and as what our first presenter talked about as well, none of this is done on your own. There's always mentors involved, and it's not necessarily a linear relationship. And so as you can see, this is Dr. Patricia Coleman Burns at the top here, my very first mentor. That's the person who I talked about who said, you're going to come back and get a PhD. And I did not believe her at first. And I just want to mention also here, the second person is Dr. Tiffany Vino. She is the one who I brought on as a cognate member in the work I was doing. So not a nurse, she's the one who studies health information behavior. And so sometimes you can't necessarily find what you're looking for in your dissertation, and that's where interdisciplinary work comes in. And Tiffany and I continue to work together. I'm one of the only nurses that is looking at health information behavior, and she helps me design my studies and think through what that looks like from a health information scientist perspective. And then I offer a nursing perspective when I talk with her. This is Dr. Shirley Moore that I told you about. And then across the top here, I won't name every mentor, but as I was thinking about my dissertation and then the studies I conducted as a postdoc, we decided to just create this continuum. And that's one of the things I want to talk about. It's very helpful to have something tangible like this so you can see what has worked, what you've accomplished, what your next steps are. And then when your plan doesn't necessarily go as you think it's going to go, this allows you the opportunity to revamp and revise that plan. And so one of my words of advice is think about what your trajectory might look like. And it doesn't have to be perfect and it doesn't have to be a straight line, but it will help you decide what mentors you need on your team, and what your next steps are. So this is very helpful for me. I will say I took a lot of the information about my research findings out, but I will say here, once you conduct some of the work that you're interested in, and think about what your next steps are, always think about the literature. So literature reviews are great. You can see what science has been conducted. You can see what experts are saying. After I did my work in my postdoc, and I learned about these brain behavior connections and how I could study them, I really wanted to see what was specific to my population. And so I did a literature review saying what we knew about Black women with hypertension from a neuroimaging perspective. And one of the things that I learned is that sometimes scientists were just talking about the brain and their findings, but there were not stringent details or information collected about demographic data. So gender, income, race, all the things that I study as a health equity scientist were not collected. And so again, this is one of the papers that I published that just offered a different perspective of my ideas as a advanced practice nurse and as a nursing scientist that maybe the neuroimaging scientists didn't think about exactly the way that I did. So these are some of the studies that I'm conducting now. I won't go into all of them. I just want to highlight, you can see neurocognition here, you can see brain relationships here. The same I'm studying in my mobile app study that I am conducting now. But if you line this up next to that slide that I showed you with all of my studies, you'll see consistency across time. And that was one of the things that helped me as a scientist to say, okay, Dr. Jones, you're on track, or maybe we'll have to go back and think about who we need on our team or what additional training that I need or what additional literature reviews I need to really understand better what my next steps were. So if I can give you one take home point is that mentorship is very, very important. So as a student, as I reflect back, I showed you the mentors who helped guide my work. But I want to also point out, I started mentoring as an undergraduate. And so it's never too early to think about how you can help someone else. And that also prepares you to be able to teach someone else, to guide someone else, to talk about your experience. All those things are helpful at your level for both you as a mentor and as a mentee that you can give back to. So very briefly, this was one of my very first mentees. I mentored her in her first clinical at the University of Michigan in the School of Nursing as a sophomore. And I actually, last year, she finished her Doctor of Nursing practice. She is a midwife, and she focuses on completely different topics from me, but we had in common that we both wanted Black women to control their blood pressure better. So I look at later in life, and she looks at during the time when they're pregnant. But I am very proud of being able to mentor her from her first nursing class all the way to the end. So even as a student, think about how you can help other students and offer your perspective, and then think about who you need to help you guide you on your next steps or who can help you better understand some of the great topics I'm sure you are all interested in. So that being said, I think I'll just move on from this slide because my contact information or my profile was put into the chat. But I'm looking forward to hearing the questions that you all have for us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's really wonderful. And looking forward selfishly to getting to work with you on our project finally at Reach for Brain. But you're seeing the theme here of mentoring. I think that's really important. We'll get to that. Reminder, you can put your questions into the chat. Let me spotlight our next speaker. So one of the other really big areas of interest that we've seen over the last 2 years is the intersection of neuroscience and education. Of course, that makes a lot of sense because, of developing brain from prenatal on. And we're really excited that each of our next two speakers are going to give us perspectives on that. First, Dr. Liz Toomarian will talk. She serves as director of the Brainwave Learning Center, a research practice partnership. This is really neat between the university, Stanford University, and an actual school, Synapse School, which we're going to learn about, which is focused on examining how educational experiences impact brain development in the real world. As an educational neuroscientist, Dr. Toomarian collaborates with educators and researchers to understand and improve the learning processes. She holds a BS in cognitive science and neuroscience from the University of California, San Diego, and an MS and PhD in educational psychology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Go Badgers here in the Big Ten, where she also taught the course Mind, Brain, and Education. Her research includes work on numerical understanding, spatial thinking, the brain's numerical spatial associations, and implementation methods in educational neuroscience. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Toomarian. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And this has been great, even just learning about other NeuroX fields. So I'm already learning a lot tonight, which is awesome. I'm excited to share a little bit more about my field of interest, which is educational neuroscience. It also somewhat confusingly goes by the term mind, brain, and education. Neuroeducation, I tend to stick with educational neuroscience. I consider myself an educational neuroscientist. Yeah, would love to just share a little bit more about what I do. I am, in fact, at a school right now, a real life school. And my work is really about building that bridge between research that happens in the university setting and the area where we have practitioners working every day with students in schools. And so we know that historically there has been research on how people have learned and how people learn in the university for a long time. There's also quite the appetite in schools to be implementing best practices from that research. And yet the two fields really don't overlap very much, historically have not overlapped, and there's been quite a separation. And lab-based research is not often really informed by the realities of the classroom. And so the field of educational neuroscience is really seeking to build bridges in a number of different ways, including through public policy and advocacy, and better informing research questions by partnering with teachers, with students, and really trying to make sure that there is less of a disconnect between how we're researching the learning process and how learning actually happens. And so that's very much the crux of my job. So before I get into that, I'll just share a little bit about my background. I was an undergraduate at UC San Diego, took a random elective class on cognitive science and was totally hooked, changed my major, and was really fascinated to learn a little bit more about sort of the underpinnings of how we think, learn, remember, pay attention. I've always been someone who likes knowing a little bit about a lot of things, and I think that that may be a bit of a theme when you see these very interdisciplinary fields. That I was excited about the opportunity to learn about psychology, about sociology, linguistics, human-computer interaction, human neuroscience, animal models, all of these things kind of converging in one interdisciplinary field. And then I got to, towards the end of my coursework, I had started doing research in a lab about developmental cognitive neuroscience. We were doing projects on how students conceptualize number, but also how young adults and adults in general process faces. And I was working in the lab. I had finished my coursework. And as I neared graduation, I had that moment that I think a lot of soon-to-be graduates have of what comes next. And I reflected on both the work that I'd been doing in undergrad in that lab and another project I had worked on in schools, where we were implementing a reading intervention with students to try to understand. We're actually implementing 2 reading interventions to see which one sort of was more effective in a school environment and whether both of them together would have super additive effects. And these interventions were informed by neuroscience research. And so in my undergraduate experience, I had, the experience of being in the lab, doing research, analyzing data, writing up papers. And then I also had this experience of implementing an intervention that had been born out of that lab-based process. And I think that was, really helpful to see the full breadth of the experience. And I reflected on, what I wanted to do next. I'd always liked being involved in school settings, and had this inflection point of, should I go the education route? Should I continue doing neuroscience research? And I ultimately decided to continue doing research, stayed for 2 years, doing more of the school-facing research, so more about the research on math and number, and applied to graduate school. And the first time I applied just generally to cognitive neuroscience programs because it was what I knew. And in that first cycle, I didn't get in anywhere. I didn't get any interviews. And I reflected on that and really thought about what had been most fulfilling and most exciting to me, what I'd read that got me asking the most follow-up questions. And it was really about the underpinning of the educational processes that we go through, when we're learning basic concepts like math and number. And I read more about it, talked to a bunch of professors who answered my emails, and ultimately applied specifically to educational neuroscience programs. And at the time, there were only a couple. Now there are several more. And in fact, in thinking about it, especially in the context of this career panel, I really had to decide when I was even applying, do I apply to a neuroscience program and I'm the only one who's really interested in looking at educational applications? Do I apply to education programs? And I'm the only one that's really like using neuroscience methods or interested in neuroscientific theories and underpinnings. And now I think there are more options where you sort of can have training in both. But I give a lot of credit to where I ultimately ended up, which was the Department of Educational Psychology in Wisconsin, for really giving quite an interdisciplinary training of both educational theories and methods, as well as cognitive neuroscientific theories and methods. Throughout that training, I really was trying to understand what's happening in the classroom, volunteering in classrooms, working with students, trying to make sure that the work that we were doing aligned, and there's certainly more to do there. But anyway, fast forward to now. I am currently the director of the Brainwave Learning Center, which is a collaboration between a traditional research lab at Stanford University in the Graduate School of Education, and a school not too far away where we have put an EEG setup, so a neuroscientific lab, actually on site at the school, as one approach, one effort to bring the lab to the school, to reduce the barriers to participation, to be able to ask scientific questions that we just couldn't ask if we were inviting students to the lab, and also to partner with teachers and students in a meaningful way to better ensure that we're asking questions that are relevant and asking questions that are really getting at the heart of problems of practice that are being presented in education. And so that's sort of the overview of how I got here. Generally, my job is to broker those relationships, to help facilitate the research studies that we do here. I am here at the school every day, so both the teachers are my colleagues as well as my research colleagues. So we're really trying to build a bridge by building a physical connection, and then also, scholarly connections as well, and personal connections are certainly at the heart of this. I'll just share a couple additional pieces of career advice. I echo everything that was said before me. I guess I would say, especially in the context of this event where we're talking about these interdisciplinary fields, I think it can be easy to sort of take a deficit perspective and thinking about what do I not know, or I know only a little bit about all these things, but I'm not a deep, true expert in any one field. And I guess I would encourage you, if you really are excited and interested in spanning multiple disciplines and spanning multiple fields, to really think about that as a strength and as an asset, and consider what you can bring to whatever field you're in, by embracing a unique set of skills and understanding that by knowing a little bit about many fields, you can contribute in a really exciting way to many conversations. I'll leave it there for now and happy to answer other questions as well.
Thank you so much. That's a really neat journey. And well, I have so many questions about what's going on in the school right now, but we'll have to wait for the Q&A, and we get to go to our next speaker. Let me spotlight you, Emma, and then do an introduction. So I'm really excited that Emma Bleakman is with us for a couple of reasons. Of course, she's going to talk about education and neuroscience, but from a different perspective, and one that's really important at the intersection of neuroscience and society fields, these NeuroX fields. They're all pretty new and they're all still emerging. And what that means is that if you want a career in one of them, guess what? You've got to be pretty entrepreneurial. You have to take some risk, and you might just have to do something that didn't exist before. And that's exactly what Emma and her team have done. Their entrepreneurial spirit has brought her here. Emma Bleakman is the co-founder of Bright Light Neuro, an education company dedicated to simplifying brain science for students and teachers. She completed her bachelor's degree in elementary education and global studies at Purdue University, and then obtained a master's degree in neuroscience and education from Teachers College at Columbia University, and has a vast experience and passion for education, taking her across the globe, Honduras, Austria, Germany, Haiti, coming to us now, I think you said, from New York. So we've got both coasts covered, but we're really excited to hear your perspective on education neuroscience from the startup entrepreneurial industry side. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's been so good to hear everyone talk about their fields. And Dr. Toomarian, you said that you were an educational neuroscientist, and I thought that that was a great point to show the flip side of that. I am a neuroscience educator, and so I went to school. My undergrad was in elementary education, and I then went on to teach third and fourth grade for 3 years. And to give a little bit of context, my dad is a neuroscientist. So a lot of our dinner time conversations just happen to be about the brain and mental health. He does neuropharmacology specifically, so drug development. And so it was something that I was always exposed to, but I knew that I wanted to work with students. So I went into elementary education, and my first 3 years teaching all happened to be during the pandemic. I've actually never taught in a normal year. And during those years, it was unfortunate, but also a silver lining that I was able to see this opportunity. I saw so many different ways that my students were struggling. And at the same time, I was becoming more interested in the brain, whether it was from the movie Inside Out or hearing about a growth mindset. And so I started having these little conference calls with my dad where he would give me a crash course in neuroscience, and I would translate that to something digestible and meaningful for my students. And the differences that I saw in them were so profound. It was the moment I knew it had to go beyond the four walls of my classroom. And when you think about the anxieties that they were having or the mental health issues that they were facing at such a young age, and the weight that was lifted off of their shoulders when they realized that it wasn't a them issue, it was just a brain thing. And so I decided that it was time to apply to grad school. And while there are a lot more neuroscience and education opportunities now, there weren't many that were in the field of neuroscience and education for a master's program that weren't research based. And so Teachers College at Columbia University had one, and it was the only school I applied to. And I said, if I get in, I'll go. If not, I'll figure something else out. And so I applied there and thankfully got in. So I moved to New York City, and that was a 2 year program. And it was phenomenal because you really could take what you were interested in and make it your own. And so I had the neuroscience courses where I was taking foundational neuroscience, neuroscience of adversity, neuroscience of reading. And then I also had the educational courses that I wanted to do, like designing a curriculum and development of creativity, developmental cognitive neuroscience. And over the course of those 2 years, I just had opportunities that took the seed idea that I had in the classroom and it snowballed into what it is today. And so I've had so many incredible mentors in my elementary education space. And then I've had so many incredible mentors at Columbia, Mount Sinai. I got to intern there. I initially had the idea to create a children's book, and it was a metaphorical comparison of the brain structure and function to a city. And while I still think it's a great idea, I realized that getting neuroscience into the elementary classroom was a far bigger, deeper problem issue than a children's book could solve. And so I did my thesis on neuroscience content instruction in the K-6 classroom and the impact of that. And I found that there were 13 studies done that I analyzed, and I did a systematic review that they all had numerous benefits to them, and there were minimal issues or setbacks that were done with these studies. And so from there, full circle moment, actually, my dad and I co-founded Bright Light Neuro earlier this year. And upon graduation in May, I have gone full time with them, and we have a phenomenal team. And I echo everything that people have said. I am just a combination of really incredible people that have poured into me and who have made me who I am. And I think Bright Light Neuro really highlights that with the team that we have. So many of them have been my mentors I've looked up to, they've poured into me. And so we're at this really unique place right now where we're talking to teachers, we're talking to scientists and to parents and to people that have developed science standards and curriculum designers to figure out how can we get everyone to have a seat at this table so that we can create really great content and resources for teachers to use to teach their students about the brain so that they can grow into adults that have this really deep, profound understanding of not only how their brain works, but really who they are as humans. And so I will say that my one piece of career advice, you can see that my trajectory has really been all over the place, and I'm sure that it's going to continue to be that way. I feel that I have always had a very central mission and my why to what I do, and that has always been to help support kids. Another way to think about it is I always want to do and create things that I wish I had as a young learner and a child. And so, although that mission has stayed central, what has come from that has consistently changed and taken all of these different turns. And I think the main thing that I can say is you never know where the end goal or the end step will be, but you always can take the next step that you think will get you there. And so over the course of my grad school, I had no idea that I would end up co-founding a company with my dad, but I took the next step with the support of my mentors and following my why. And then that next step led me to the next step, and it just continued on that way. But it's impossible to see where you'll be exactly in 10 years. That the only thing you can really do is take the step that's meant for you, that's right in front of you. So I am incredibly fortunate to be doing the work that I do. Right now, I do quite a bit more like exec CEO type things than I would prefer to be doing. I am a teacher through and through. I love creating curriculum. I love working with kids. I love working with teachers, but it's all part of the process, and it's been really fun. I've learned so much, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll also be in the panel after this, so I will stick around.
Great, thank you. This is great. So we are going to have about 12 minutes. We've got obviously way too many questions for that, but what I've tried to do is distill them into some themes so that we can hit those questions that seem to be most resonant across a number of the attendees right now. And let's start with mentoring. Dr. Jones, the question, one of the questions was addressed to you, but really I think all panelists, because there are multiple versions of this question. So I'll read several of those versions. To Dr. Jones, what should we specifically look for when proactively seeking or looking for good mentors? This came up and said to all the panelists, someone else asked, did you decide so someone would be your mentor before you really got to know them? Or did most of your mentorships happen organically? And finally, and this is really, I mean, mentoring is important everywhere. This is really specific to neuro. Any tips on finding research and mentorship while at a school that may not offer many neuro research opportunities? I know many of our students from that. So maybe, Dr. Jones, you can start, and if any of our other panelists want to jump in on that mentorship question.
Absolutely. So these are all really good questions. I'm glad that you raised them. So there's a combination of both of ways that I have come across mentors. So the first mentor I showed you, Dr. Patricia Coleman Burns, she actually was trying to convince me to come to the University of Michigan. We'll start there. And so I had, several scholarships to several places, and I was really trying to determine my decision. And she said, well, if you come to the University of Michigan, I have a research lab and I have some plans for you. And so as an 18-year-old student, I had no idea what that meant. But so first it felt good, right? She was very much interested in me as a student, and she said she saw things in me that maybe I didn't see myself. The second thing is that so she had a plan as a mentor that I didn't quite understand. And so one of the things that I did is I went to the university. I'm probably dating myself here. This is when we still had copy cards, and we had to actually print the articles out to make copies of them. But one of the things that helped me with is I came 3 weeks before the semester started. And so by the time the semester started, I knew where all the classrooms were. I knew how to navigate campus. I knew how to use the library, which I was going to have to use for the rest of my career. And so she asked me to meet with her on a monthly basis. And then she actually connected me with some nursing organizations. I was able to present at my first conference as a sophomore in the School of Nursing. And so these are all things that I would have no idea about as an undergraduate, but it was really that mentorship. So to use some tips from that situation. Listen when people say they have an idea for you. You might not have, any interest in a PhD or anything else, but really listening to see what they're saying, what skills they see in you, or what skills they want to help you build. When I was trying to decide which lab I wanted to work in, Dr. Patricia Coleman Burns, she had a plan in place. And so I think it's important. It's not just, oh, this person is nice, I want to work with them, but really listening to what they've accomplished and what they would like to accomplish with you. Um, I think the last thing I would say is that if you maybe don't necessarily have someone at your institution, sometimes there's funding at your institution for you to go to a conference. Sometimes there's fundings from foundations that will support you going to a conference. And we love making connections. Like scientists love to hear when you come up after they present or after they talk, or even if you send an email and said, someone put a paper, I think, in the chat and say, I read this paper and I want to understand more about this, or I want to understand how you came up with this idea. We love to share, and sometimes we can't respond like right away. But really, reaching out and having those conversations is nothing to be nervous about in the scientific community. That's what we do as part of networking. And so if you meet someone, if someone shares their contact information with you, reaching out and talking to them or saying, I'm looking for a mentor. They may not be able to mentor you on a monthly basis, but even if you can touch base with somebody quarterly or once a year, they may be able to share some pearls with you that might help you think through your next steps. So I will stop there and see if anyone else has any other ideas about mentorship to share.
Anybody else like to jump in?
Yeah, happy to add to, unless Emma or Liz wanted to jump in. I think, Lynette, I totally agree with everything you mentioned. I mean, I think also similar to what you described, finding mentors was a combination of like looking up people who I thought that would be interesting to talk to, but also kind of organically finding it. Because sometimes it's a matter of, maybe working in a lab for a while or being in a volunteer position where you start to recognize, oh, that person seems to share some of the same values and I think could really resonate and build a good rapport. I could build a good rapport with them. And so I definitely agree with that. I think one of the other things that I found sort of challenging was to find somebody that was coming from like, who was honestly like a female leader. Most of the mentors I have had throughout my career have honestly been males, like in the research setting, and then even going into philanthropy. And so I think one thing that I started to realize as I got further in my career is that I actively wanted to seek out mentorship from women, and especially mentorship also from women coming from backgrounds that were underrepresented in the fields that I had been working in. And so I think that it became a little bit more specific as I went on because I recognized there were certain needs that needed to be filled in order for me to become a more well-rounded leader.
Great. Maybe I'll just add another question. We've got a few more minutes. And this next one, I think, touches on all four of your experiences. I'm going to read sort of two questions, which I'll paraphrase. For someone interested in working at the intersection of neuroscience and public policy advocacy, is a degree beyond a bachelor's in neuroscience or health policy necessary? And which is the better choice? Several of the question asked this. Should you pursue one really wholeheartedly or try and do both? And similarly, somebody else asked, what qualities or experiences do you believe make candidates stand out for intersectional roles, for instance, incorporating diverse fields such as education, public health, policy? Is it better to focus on one and pursue others through like volunteering, community involvement? really be interested in your thoughts. You've taken different approaches to that, but you can't do it all. So how do you decide what to do?
I can touch closely on this because I have thought over and over about getting either a PhD or an educational doctorate. Right now, I just have my master's, and I feel that I'm going to continue to build in my experience. And if one day I feel like the doctorate is what I need to continue to advance what I do, then that's the direction I'll go. But I feel that even having the experience after my bachelor's degree and having the 3 years in the classroom and then getting my master's degree was really helpful to know the avenue that I wanted to go in and the direction I wanted to go. And then if I want to get a doctorate, I think I'll know that more once I get a little bit more experience under my belt and have these experiences and figure out the direction that makes the most sense.
Let me throw one other question out here. We got 3 minutes, and we've got a breakout rooms that will come next. This is again is sort of a hodgepodge of about 3 or 4 different questions. Basically, versions up. How did you figure out neuroscience was what you wanted to do? And in particular, and I think this really this comes up in several of the questions, is getting increasingly tough to figure out what slice of neuroscience. Is it more applied, more basic research, more clinical, more policy? Maybe just some closing thoughts on that from each of you, and really any kind of parting wisdom or resources that you'd recommend that folks check out. I mean, we'll just start maybe Dr. Toomarian, if you want to go first, and we'll just go in reverse order. Then we can go to Emma and Dr. Jones and Carolyn.
Sure. Well, what was the last question?
Well, it just how to figure out what slice of neuroscience. I mean,
Yeah.
So much in education is related to neuro. I mean, how do you? One of our students is an undergrad, another is a master's, both asking the same question. Like, I can take just a couple classes. What do I take?
I mean, I think you just have to start somewhere. I think for me, it was really about a very, one inspirational lecture that I heard that really helped get me started. And that was on face processing. And I don't do anything related to face processing now. And so, face processing led to developmental cognitive neuroscience, which led to studies of math and number, which led to reflection on whether I wanted to do, it all sort of, I think you just start somewhere. And if you're still looking for sources of inspiration, I'd say, reading has been really helpful. So reading popular press books, looking on different websites. I think events like this are really helpful to see if there's something that someone said that really sparked an interest and starting to learn more. So I think exposure to all of these factors is really important. And I might just comment on the previous question, which is why I lost my train of thought. I was really thinking about that. I get asked all the time, should I do a PhD, which is sort of related to the question that was posed. And I guess the main thing I would say is talk to people who have done it, talk to people who have gone through alternative paths, and just make sure that you really understand what that process is like, and thinking about it more as not just a means to an end to getting the degree, but really about understanding what it is to be a researcher and if that's the right path for you. I think the best way to do that is just to talk to people who have been through it, and multiple people, because many people have different experiences. So that's just one note that I would leave with, which is that information gathering is a very powerful tool, and especially in thinking about these interdisciplinary careers, you can have a very similar educational path and use it in very different ways. And so just the more perspectives you can hear, I think can only be a strength.
Thank you. Emma, any final recommendations, thoughts?
I don't have anything profound, so I'll let the other two take it away.
Okay, we'll go to Dr. Jones and then Dr. Montoya.
So Emma, what you shared already was profound. So you just put a period at the end of that. So I would suggest, and I did not have this opportunity, right? Because I did not do anything with neuroscience until my postdoc. But I do have, I think, 5 undergraduates in my lab that are BCN students at University of Michigan. And so they're already interested in cognition and neuroscience. And so they at least get exposure with me for a year. Many of them continue on of what I do in my perspective on neuroscience and the particular way that I study. And so at least, even as an undergraduate, and I've also mentored one physician and actually a public policy student through my lab. And so at least they got some hands-on experience and they could say, well, this is for me, or perhaps I'd like to study some other approach. I think the earlier that you are able to get that experience, that can kind of guide some decisions. And so then you're having those conversations and determining, or at least getting some exposure to this is my potential next step, or, this is not something I'm interested in, and I've learned that I have something to take away from it, and I can talk with someone else. And so it goes back to really just what exposure you can get. Yes, you can do some things through volunteer activities. I have several students who are interested in policy, and it's not necessarily part of their curriculum, particularly in nursing or in LS&A at University of Michigan. And so they get that experience through volunteering. But I think the more exposure that you can get while continuing to focus on and achieve your goals, so whether that's achieving whatever your undergraduate degree is or your master's degree, but whatever you can do to broaden and continue to color your perspective without distracting yourself from your goal, I think is a great idea, and it's only going to help you determine what the best next step is for you.
Thank you. Dr. Montoya.
Sure. Yes. Thank you. I realize we're at the end of the hour now. So I also just want to thank all of my fellow panelists as well as you, Francis, just for this opportunity. It's been so lovely hearing from everyone. And, Emma, I would also underscore that I think that you said something absolutely profound earlier, which is around following your why. That really struck me because I think, to this question around like which slice of neuroscience and do we start to learn one area before we go on to the next? Is it a step by step or is it all learning at the same time? I think that when I reflect on my own experience, I think that it always came back to the why. There was always this aspect, even if it looked a little different at each each section of my life, from first being interested in mental health and going to cogneuro, it was like the why for me was how can I best channel my strengths into a career path that can help people. And so that's what ended up leading to a path that went into these different fields. And so I just wanted to really underscore that I think that the whole process of sort of career development and learning about career paths is, I think, increasingly coming to a recognition of, one's own core, like driving values. And so, and that takes time too. It's not necessarily a given from the outset of your career.
Thank you to all the wonderful words from everyone. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to the foundation for making this possible. And thanks to all of you for being here. I just want to conclude with 3 things because we're not done yet. First of all, we have 3 more days, which are going to be awesome. We've got neuromarketing, neurobusiness, and neuroeconomics and related fields tomorrow. Wednesday, we turn to this awesome combination of neuroscience and humanities and design and neuroarchitecture and neurospirituality. And Thursday, we finish with neurolaw, neuroethics, neuroforensics, neurocriminology. So come back for all of those and tell your friends. And stick around tonight if you want to keep talking. I'm about to introduce our 5 breakout room leaders. And also come back anytime to the Career Network. We cannot be, mentors for 1,000 people, but we're there to help break down some barriers. And one of the ways to network and find a mentor is to let us help you. So we've got a full-time fellow, and that's our role, is to play that middle person. So with that, let me thank each of our panelists, and we're going to transition into, I'm going to keep the spotlight for you, Emma, and I'm going to spotlight our other breakout room leaders, who I think are all here. Give me 1 second as I do that, and then we will transition. So now we got to find them, each of you here. Okay, there's Daniel. So I'm going to add you. Spotlight. Okay, spotlight. And then we're going to add Janae, so that. Thank you for the help. team and spotlight. Do we get everybody? We're missing Nate, Jimmy, we got do we do it? I feel like we're missing.
Janet, I can't. For some
Okay,
reason.
see if Janet's here. There's Janet. Okay, so add spotlight. Okay, great. Well, thank you, first of all, to all of our breakout room leaders. This is actually the first time that I get to say hi because we were in the first hour. Let me say a word about how these breakout rooms will work, and then I will introduce each of our breakout room leaders, and then we'll open up all the breakout rooms. So the way it will work is we have basically just under an hour until 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, and what's that, 7 p.m. Mountain. And during that time, you can bounce around. So the participants can bounce around to different breakout rooms. You can stay here in the main room. I'm just going to hang out here in the main room and we can talk neuroscience and society or neuroscience and law, or whatever you like. So that's up to you. And these breakout rooms are designed to be a welcoming collegial space for conversation. Our breakout room leaders know that you may be going from room to room. It's kind of like office hours, except the sort of office hours you probably never get on campus because we've got such a unique blend of folks. So that's it. I hope you'll stick around and go to all the breakout rooms or stick around here in the main room. Let me introduce each of our colleagues and then each of breakout room leaders. If there's anything you want to say about yourselves or what you'll cover, we'll just give you the floor and then we'll open up the breakout rooms. Okay, so first, Dr. Daniel Yudkin is a social psychologist who studies how people decide between right and wrong and how those right and wrong decisions impact relationships, organizations, and society. He's currently a visiting scholar at the Wharton School and a senior advisor at More in Common, which is an international initiative to build communities and societies that are stronger, more united, and more resilient to the increasing threats of polarization and social division. Very important right now. Holds a PhD in psychology from NYU and a diploma in modern jazz piano performance from the Centre International de la Musique, and undergraduate degree in Williams College, psychology and philosophy. Dr. Yukin, anything you want to say about your breakout room or topics you might be covering? Oh, let's see. There we go. Now you can maybe unmute. Let me make you co-host.
Yeah, just want to say nice to be here and looking forward to chatting with people. And I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but I'm looking forward to rolling with it. So it should be fun.
Great. Well, thanks for being here and volunteering your time.
Of course.
Next, we introduced her before. If you were on at the beginning, though you might have come later, so do a proper introduction now. Chinmay Balusu is a valued member of our career network team, but also the founder and CEO of Simply Neuroscience, who co-sponsored and co-runs this event, which is Simply Neuroscience is a student-led nonprofit expanding early career neuroscience opportunities across 142 countries. Also serves in leadership and advisory roles with multiple neuroscience advocacy and outreach platforms, American Brain Coalition, International Neuroethics Society, it goes on and on. She graduated from Columbia University, the BA in Medical Humanities and an MPH in Neuroepidemiology, and has research experience in TBI, clinical stroke outcomes, and cross-cultural neuroethics in the context of global health. Chinmay, anything you want to say?
Amazing, thank you. Happy to chat about public health, neuroethics, humanities, all goes.
Okay, great. Then we have, I think we're going to have a tag team breakout room, right? It's going to be Kao Li Yang and Janet Lee. I'll introduce both. So Kao Li Yang is an MPA PhD candidate at UW-Madison. She graduated with her BA and MA in psychology from UW-Stoughton and Ball State. And her interests are in the aging brain, Alzheimer's disease, aging, and neurodegeneration, and launched Hmong in the Biological Sciences, which is a professional networking group intended to bring together scientists and trainees to identify Hmong. Thanks so much for being here. Janet Lee is pursuing a PhD in neuroscience and public policy, which is a great program. We gave a talk there a long time ago at UW-Madison in their neuroscience training program, as well as an MA in public affairs at Lafayette School of Public Affairs. So all this neuroscience and public policy world. Also, that wasn't enough, TL1 pre-doctoral trainee through the UW ICTR. That's Institute for Clinical and Translational Research. Her project, Psychedelic Outcomes, Interaction of Environment and Self-Identity, supporting prolonged likelihood of unprejudiced success and has expertise in rapidly emerging important area of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapeutic outcomes. The two of you, I think, will team up together, right? And would you like to say anything about what you'll cover?
Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. I don't have anything specific because I'm open to whatever questions or thoughts come to mind from the participants. So do swing by. Janet, did you want to say anything?
All I'll say is that I second that opinion. We're happy to take anything.
Okay, thanks so much for being here. And that is one of the most unique graduate programs in the country. The program there at UW-Madison that combines graduate training in neuroscience explicitly with policy and even law. There's kind of a neuroscience and law component to it. So great, thanks so much for being here and speaking to that and your experiences. And then finally, we have Joya. Now I didn't get to ask you how to pronounce names. I'm gonna try it. Bhattacharya. No, tell me how shall I pronounce your name correctly?
Very close. I'm Joya Bhattacharya. Nice to meet everyone.
Bhattacharya. Okay, Joya Bhattacharya. Thank you so much for being here. PhD student and graduate research assistant in epidemiology at George Washington University Milken Institute School of Public Health. Previously held research positions at the World Health Organization, Collaborating Center for Global Mental Health, the Nathan Klein Institute of Psychiatric Research, and the UVA Cognitive Aging Laboratory. Again, really focusing on the policy implications and policy application of scientific research. Research interests include psychiatric epidemiology of affective and neurodegenerative disorders, as well as building capacity for mental health research and care in low and middle income countries, a BA in global public health and cognitive science. So you can talk about dual tracks at the University of Virginia, and an MPH in epidemiology from Columbia University. Anything you want to say, Joya, about your breakout room?
Yeah. I'm interested in talking to people about like very non-traditional paths from neuro to maybe other kinds of programs, and also just student life in general. I kind of went bam from bachelor's to master's to PhD, so I'm really down to talk about how to balance that and not lose your mind. And yeah, just student culture in general.
Wonderful. And we've met Emma before. Emma, anything you want to say before we go to the breakout rooms?
No, anything neuroscience, education, whatever it might be, I'm here.
Okay, great. And then I'll stay in the main room to talk about the career network. My own areas of expertise are neuroscience and law, neuroscience and policy, and we can talk about any of that as well, or anything related to the career network, which we're always excited to talk about. So, okay, now I'm going to stop recording. So we've